Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at, whenever you are listening. Welcome to Two Marine Dads Podcast, episode 12.
12, yeah.
12 times. We've been absent for a little while, but John's been moving. We've been busy. Things have been happening as life goes, so we've taken a little bit of a hiatus. But, per usual, we're here. And John is actually on location now. We're going to try a little bit of a different setup for you all. We hope you enjoy it. It's kind of hodgepodge, and we'll make it better as time goes on, but we kind of like where we're sitting right now. Today we're going to talk about HR 127, the Sabika Shake bill. If I pronounce that wrong, I apologize. No ill intent provided. I just don't know how to pronounce it, along with Illinois or Pahonix. With today's episode, we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about the bill, what we don't like about it, which is pretty much everything. And
from the start to the finish, yeah.
And kind of highlight some of the facts and some of the overlooked points that are brought up in this bill and what we see as some of the future problems with it.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know, the first thing that jumps out for me in this bill is that a database is going to be created for every firearm owner, and you, me, everybody, that gives local, state, and the military access to this database. So you essentially don't have a Fourth Amendment right anymore. Your right to privacy is blown straight out the water because all federal, state, local authorities, all branches of the United States Armed Forces, state and local governments, as defined by the Bureau, will have access to this database and figure out who's got what.
Along with public. It's going to be public available. So, any crypt or blood or gang member from whatever city or criminal basically gets a shopping list for the guns you hold in your house. Because not only do you have to give very specific serial numbers, model types, you have to very specifically state where they're stored.
Yep, and how they're stored, etc.
And kind of rolling back a little bit, talking about this bill, it's named the Sabika Shake Bill, HR 127, because Sabika Shake was unfortunately killed in a school shooting in 2018 in Santa Fe in Texas. In May of 2018, she was an exchange student from Pakistan. She was one of 10 people, I believe, two teachers and 8 students that
Correct.
were killed by a fellow student in a high school. Now, you may ask, why did they name it the Sabika Shake Bill? Well, it's for each one to interject in their own opinions, but when you've got a school full of a bunch of kids and the one that stands out is a foreign exchange student from Pakistan, it makes you wonder why specifically they picked that name. It doesn't make me wonder. I know exactly why they did it. It's things so they can obviously drum up support. It's a great marketing tactic, but also now they can call anybody who stands against the bill a racist or a bigot.
Yep.
Or
misogynist.
Islamophobia, Islamophobe, whatever name they want to tag onto somebody because they don't want to actually argue the merits of the bill. They just want to jam it through.
Or of the shooter, he was an incel, lowest of the low. He got rejected by a lot of different girls and ended up taking his rage out with a firearm. He was psychologically upset.
And we'll get into the specifics a little bit more, but the firearms he used was a Remington 870 pump shotgun and a 38 caliber snub-nose revolver. Both guns of which will still be legal when this bill is passed.
They're not.
If this bill is passed, those 2 firearms specifically will be legal.
Yep.
So again, I ask, what is the purpose of bringing these children into the bill when their tragedy would not have been prevented by this bill?
Right. No, her name says it all. Yep.
And what John talked about a little bit ago about registration of guns, there isn't a time in history that I can find, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the registration of firearms has not led to confiscation. Period. End of story, end of argument. Every time gun registration happens, it ends in confiscation.
Correct. Yep. It's happened in Germany, 1940s, 1930s. Yep. Mao, China.
Australia.
Yep. Australia,
China.
Specifically Australia, most recently. That was 10 years ago.
More than that. I think it was the 90s. Wasn't it like 98 or 96? It was a while ago, but nonetheless,
30 years ago.
Nonetheless, registration. It's the general path of it. It's the whole purpose for registration. The whole point of registration is to eventually be able to take away the guns that are registered.
Because they know where they are. Yep.
They can't confiscate until they have them registered. So this is just a stepping stone to another bill. the, you know, in big picture, I don't think this bill stands a chance in hell of being passed for many reasons. Several of the things that are inside the bill have already been beat in court. Things from the magazine capacities, restrictions and requirements for storage at home have been beaten one way or another in court. And by beat, I mean upheld the rights of the individual to protect themselves. They have been beat. So there is already precedent that this law is unconstitutional. On top of that, I don't think it has the support. That being said, the people that are writing this bill and supporting this bill know that as well. So what is their game? Sheila Jackson Lee is the prime supporter of this bill, the sponsor.
She introduced it, yeah.
She's the one that's the main name behind this. And quite honestly, she's one of the stupidest people in Congress. And I don't just say that because I don't like her and because she's a liberal. When you listen to her speak, you are dumber for it.
Oh, yeah.
She's like a black hole of intelligence. Whenever you're around her, you're dumber whenever you leave.
You lose IQ points.
And it shows when she tries to argue points or she talks about it, because eventually she always devolves into just a racist, misogynist diatribe about the only reason you don't agree with her is because she's black or she's a woman. There's no substance. And right. John has the quote, but she even gets her planets wrong, which is interesting.
Yeah. She asked if let's see here. She asked if the Pathfinder was able to take a picture of the flag that Neil Armstrong planted on Mars
in
1969.
Mind you, Pathfinder went to Mars.
Not the moon.
Neil Armstrong went to the moon. I mean, they both begin with M, but they're still about a million miles apart. I don't know, several million miles apart.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of M's there. Yeah. But needless to say, she's not the most... No. She's not the tool you would pull out when you need to cut something.
Yeah, no, she's not a tool at all. She's the asphalt you drive on. No, not even that. I'm giving her too much credit. Okay,
I mean, getting away from the personal attacks. She's in the past. She's got a history of very extremist views wanting to nationalize the entire oil industry.
Oil industry, yeah. She also nationalized.
She said that publicly. She said it in a forget which hearing it was. It was one of the House hearings. Back in, I want to say 2012.
Yep, she was talking to the oil companies, asking them
why shouldn't we nationalize you guys?
Basically, he was I have to look up his name, but somebody like who represented Exxon or BP, a big guy like this was telling her, hey, look, if you don't allow us to drill, you will see prices go up. And she was like, if prices go up, we're gonna nationalize. And then she backed it off real quick. I mean, take over the oil industry because there's so much difference in those two.
Heavily regulate and control what you guys do. Shit, I said nationalize.
A momentary lapse of truth is what she had.
Yeah.
But she just wasn't listening to the guy who had the plan, the guy who knew what was going on. She just wasn't paying attention to what he had to say and didn't like what he had to say. She was all about Mother Earth. And
she was all about her just getting elected.
Yeah, getting elected, reducing her carbon footprint, and screw everybody else. But
the bill, so when you get into the bill, it's if you want to go read it, we'll put a link in the description. But it's only 12 pages or so, and 4 of those are just nothing. They're legalese and definitions and things like that. But the bill starts off with requiring the registration, which we dug into, and basically it leaves it up to the AG. And that's what a lot of these really lazy politicians do now. Instead of actually being very prescriptive in their bills, they're very general. They leave these broad-ranging terms, and they say it's up to the AG, or it's up to the Secretary of the Treasury, or it's up to so-and-so bureaucratic organization to determine from here on out what is what. And this is why you end up in shitty positions where you have lots of confusion, just like the bump stocks. For, 10 years, 15 years, bump stocks were perfectly legal. I have a letter from the ATF that says my bump stock is legal. The one that I used to have.
Yeah, the one I used to have too. This 10-year fine now, or 10-year.
Yeah. They gave the directions on how to dismantle it, or you had to just completely destroy it. In fitting style, I blew mine up with tannerite. It was heartbreaking, but satisfying at the same time. Nonetheless, they leave these very broad-ranging terms so that the bureaucrats can determine it. And what happens is, from administration to administration, you have huge changes. I mean, think about it. From the difference between Eric Holder and Bill Barr. and how they approach things and how they view the legal system.
Yep, night and day.
And they're the ones that get to determine what's legal or not. So overnight, because one person's opinion, you go from a legal citizen to a felon.
Yep.
Or from a felon to a legal citizen, just depending on the whims of these people. So that's one of the big problems I have with the bill just right out the gate, is it's not prescriptive. It is broad-ranging and passes the buck to the bureaucracy, which doesn't answer to anybody. You know, if you're a Republican, you absolutely detested, and probably still do, Eric Holder. And from what I can tell, people on the left hate Bill Barr. So now, instead of somebody that you can do nothing about, you can't vote them out, you can't do anything to elect them or hold them accountable.
They're in charge of
what's legal and not.
Right. That's insane. You know, some of the stuff in here is pretty scary too. Like, you're required to undergo a psychological evaluation. And that doesn't mean just psychological evaluation. They're going to interview your family members that live with you. In fact, they can interview your ex-spouses. Now think about what that means. So say you are a misogynist and you wail on your wife or whatever. She leaves you. She goes out and she buys a 357 or something to protect herself. And then they come interview her. You're her ex-spouse. And you're like, she's a crazy psycho bitch. You know? And then they take her firearm away from her. So now she doesn't have protection against you. Just the myriad of crap that being able to interview and ascertain the opinion of an ex-spouse, what that means to the other individual in the equation.
And you think about how many marriages end unamicably.
Yeah, unamicably. Yeah, mine ended
very few end amicably. Yeah. So because you could be the biggest douchebag on the planet. You could have cheated on your wife multiple times, had children with strippers, with multiple women, living multiple lives, and be this horrible person, and your fucking ex-wife hates you. And rightfully so hates you.
Right.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to own a firearm.
And vice versa. You shouldn't be able to take hers away from her to defend
her.
Yeah,
no, 100%.
Yeah.
But you think about the idea that because somebody doesn't like you and because they can dictate that, they can take your guns away. And if you don't think that's possible...
Read it. It's right here. It's in black and white.
Well, and look at what's happened in certain states that have passed red flag laws. Ex-girlfriends have gotten guys' houses raided and had their guns taken away because she was a pissed off ex-girlfriend.
Right.
What's that country song where the girl takes a key to his car and
Shania Twain, where she takes it.
Is it no? It's newer. Is that Shania Twain?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's Shania Twain, right?
I think it's somebody newer than that. Nonetheless, imagine that. Imagine a girlfriend that's pissed off like that because you're macking on a honey at the pool table or whatever the way this country song goes. And instead of keying your car, she calls the ATF, and you get home, and your house is ransacked, and your small collection of firearms has been seized to never be seen again.
Even though they were stored correctly, you weren't doing anything wrong with them. You're a law-abiding citizen. They can still be taken away. And that goes for all firearms, like the antiques that you could be able to put up.
Right.
You got to have a storage.
That was something that even surprised me. Yeah, there was things in this bill there weren't things in this bill that I expected to see there. Things like holding people accountable for not properly storing and things like that weren't very well worded. They're kind of in here, but they're not directly worded like I've seen in other bills. But like you were talking, the antique thing. I did not expect that.
Yeah, antique. And then you have to prove to the AG that you have it and that you can store it properly. So what does that mean? Like if you have it above your bar or in your office or something like that, this firearm that is in of itself is a safety. I mean, you got to take the ramrod and ram it and add the powder and put the flintlock on it and all the rest of this. You're telling me something like that is itself a safety has to be locked up every night.
It's got black powder that you've got a special order from fucking Germany. It's got a flint for the flintlock that you can only get out of a damn museum, and
it stands 8 feet tall.
It only works on non-humid days.
But it's got a attachable. You can attach a bayonet to it, so it's probably illegal.
Yeah. Something that looks like a pistol grip.
Yeah, something that has a conspicuous pistol grip. Protruding from the bottom of the action.
Conspicuously protrudes.
Yeah. Oh God, guys, you should read this. It's ridiculous.
The another one in here that they get into is the insurance, right? And this is something that some people can get into, and there is insurance out there for it. It's kind of geared different, but this one requires that if you're a gun owner, you have insurance, right? Now, a lot of people argue that it's just like cars, right? If you're going to drive a car, you have to have insurance. It's a requirement. It's the law. Last time I checked, driving a car wasn't in the Constitution. It wasn't a constitutionally, like an enumerated, very specifically protected right.
But you don't even, but going back to the car thing, if I jump in here, you can drive all day long to your heart's content on your own private property without insurance, without a tag, with nothing. You can build the car yourself, no registration, anything. No
or race it on a racetrack.
Yeah, if you tow it there. The moment you decide to drive that thing, public roads, and you pose a financial risk to somebody else, that's when you need the insurance, according to the law.
Right.
So this is totally different. So you can't shoot
that argument,
deer on your own property. You can't.
That gear is that's the crazy thing about this argument is now it's akin to a poll tax. Now, voting isn't a human right, and that's a whole argument for a whole nother day. But it's still wrong to charge a tax to allow somebody to vote. It's the end of the day, and poll taxes were resoundingly destroyed. Now, requiring a tax for you to be able to defend yourself, because that's what this is. You can call it insurance if you want. It doesn't go to a company; it goes to the government. Governments aren't insurance institutes; they're governments. So when it takes money from you, it's a tax.
It's a tax. Period.
I don't care how you want to misinform it, how you want to word it to try and convince people.
Yeah.
It's a tax. So now you have to pay a tax.
Just to register one firearm is how I read this. $800 for a firearm.
I don't know, dude. I don't know if the license is per fire. It's not descriptive enough. To me, it seems like it leaves it up to the AG to determine. Now, if it's $800 per firearm, that wouldn't surprise me because that's like the NFA. It requires you a $300 tax stamp.
Did you pay once though, and you're done?
But for each item.
Fair enough. Yeah.
If every suppressor I have a $300 tax stamp for each and individual.
Unless, okay, we can get down a rabbit hole on that one. But yeah, I mean, unless you become an NFA manufacturer and then you can.
Right.
So there's ways around that, but yeah, absolutely. Anything that's a short-barreled rifle or a destructive device.
So now you are putting a hurdle for poor people. $800. You have to pay $800 a year in order to have a firearm. And even if you just want one, if you want one little pistol next to your bed and you go out and buy a $300 handgun just to protect yourself.
The insurance on it's triple.
Now you got to pay $800 a year to the government.
Over double, yeah.
To exercise your God-given right for self-defense.
Yeah, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
So to me, this is one of those many things that will not stand up in court under a constitutional basis, period. And you can argue that liberal courts, conservative courts, even the Ninth Circuit has thrown out some of California's most recent crazy laws, including the magazines, which we'll get into those in a little bit. Those have been the Ninth Circuit, which is the nutty ninth, as a lot of people refer to it, is even some of these laws are so far a fringe that they won't even uphold them. It gets into restrictions on ammo. There's a line in here about you can't have no 50 cal or larger ammo shall be is not be legal. Possessed or can't be legal for somebody to own. Period. There's no variation for it. You can't have it. That's great. Okay, so they want to restrict 50 caliber BMG, and it would be nice if they specifically called that out, or maybe even 50 AE. But no, they don't. Which by reading this, the ATF and the Attorney General could say, nope, 50 ball muskets.
Yeah, muskets.
Which most muskets are 50 cal or larger.
Bigger. Yeah, or bigger, yeah.
So you got a musket that's barely able to kill something at 50 yards, and it takes if you're well trained, it takes you fucking 45 seconds to reload. If you're well trained, which they're not, most people aren't anymore on muskets.
No, because it's not 1750.
That is now illegal.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily, we can laugh about it, we can joke about it, but it speaks to the nonsensical nature of this bill, right, and how the people that are writing laws don't understand what they're writing laws about. No. This is like somebody who lives in New York coming to Montana and writing HOA rules.
Right. No clue what
has no clue what the culture is, has no clue what's going on in town or what even matters to the people here, but brings their perspective of what's important and then starts writing rules for the people around them. That's exactly what this is. You have people that have probably never even handled a firearm in their entire life are writing laws to restrict them. Right. And even if they meant well, their ignorance overwhelms their ability to do something that is actually good.
Right. So, to that point, the Geneva Convention, as you remember, we were trained on all that. Your firearms have to be ball. So like your 5.56 is a ball round.
5.56 ball round.
And the reason why it's a ball round and not a fucking semi-wad cutter and not a hollow tip or not something that's frangible is because when it hits you, it creates a hole and goes out the other end. And prior to World War I, you could do whatever you wanted on the battlefield, and you would maim a guy to the point where he would live just long enough to catch an infection and then bleed out and die. Where they were saying, okay, how can we make war, quote unquote, more humane, which is fucking impossible. But they standardized the style of round that you were allowed to use, and said, okay, no matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're, I don't know, you're Warsaw or NATO, your ball it'll be a ball round. And if you compare that to say something like you were saying, like a 300 Win Mag, yeah, how that round expands and the damage that it creates to the game you're shooting at it, that's perfectly legal. You can shoot all day with that, but the actual round that's meant to just injure and not kill the person, a two-legged game, if you want to call it that, that's what we're gonna ban. You know, my 357 or my 30-30 that expands and blows big holes in deer. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. But that little 5.56 round that'll go in one hole and make a teeny tiny hole on the outside, yeah, that's what we're going to ban. Again, speaks to the ignorance of it.
And you get into the actual specific weapon restrictions and the things they talk about. Obviously, they go after high capacity magazines, which is just a fucking made up word. But at the end of the day, they almost copy and paste the old assault weapons ban, which basically the FBI said did nothing. It achieved nothing. Mm-mm. It didn't have any meaningful effect on crime, up or down. It was just a law, and all it did was make law-abiding citizens more difficult for them to buy firearms. It had no effect. And they essentially copy and pasted, from what I can see. It might not be copy and pasted, but it's highly...
very similarly worded.
Yeah. One might use the word... what is it when you steal somebody's work?
Plagiarism.
Plagiarized. Highly plagiarized from the assault weapons ban. And it's funny because you could take every specific gun that they call out in here. They call everything basically any FN FAL or Fabrique Nationale, AK, anything that's an AR-15 or similar
a copy of an automatic style weapon, even though it's semi-automatic.
An automatic weapon copy that is semi-automatic. All of these weapons, if you added every one of the people that were shot and killed, legally or illegally, there are legal murders, right? When you self-defense, that is still a murder. Or no, it's not murder. It's a
manslaughter.
It's a homicide. It's a legal homicide, a justified homicide. If you take all of those and add them up together, it doesn't even put a dent in the total number of gun deaths in the country. So you're going to take away 5%. In some instances, it depends on how you want to categorize it, but it's as low as 1%. It's between 1 and 5% of all gun deaths in the United States every year are done by the very specifically called out weapons in this bill.
Most of them are done by handgun.
These are the ones that they're going to outlaw. Right. The ones that have absolutely no effect on gun violence.
Right.
So I ask, why would they do this? Why are they focusing on firearms that have no actual appreciable effect on gun violence? When the whole point of the bill is supposedly to stop gun violence and gun safety. Well, it's pretty quite simple. They're just going after the guns, and this is a tool that they can use to go after them and not be held accountable for the outcome of their law.
Right.
They mean well. They know path to hell is paved with good intentions, right, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, some of the other things that are in here, like if an individual has been hospitalized, okay, and then they define that. They say mental illness, disturbance, diagnosis, including depression, homicidal, suicidal, attempted suicide, addiction to a controlled substance to include alcohol, Alzheimer's, dementia. Okay, so you could argue that the guy with dementia probably doesn't need a firearm. But
well, let's back up here.
If you go to like depression, what does that mean? If you've been hospitalized for depression.
Well, let's back up here a little bit. So one of the things in this bill is you have to get a license to own a firearm now.
Right.
So again, you have to have a license, not just insurance. Now you have to get a license, which has a bunch of requirements in and of itself, in order to exercise a right. You have to have a license from the government that says you're allowed to exercise your right. Inside this licensing requirement is what John's talking about, is a requirement to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. There's a test, and there's some other mumbo jumbo about some other bullshit in here that, sure, some of it you could say is great, I would argue that it's meaningless in the way they have it worded in the bill specifically, and that should be left up to state governments on how they require, and even local, even more local city governments. But there's the very thing that's scary to John and I in here is the requirement for a psychological evaluation.
Yeah. What happens if you go through some sort of trauma? You have a loved one that passes on, or you yourself get into a traumatic situation. You have PTSD.
You go to war.
And you come back and you're like, hey, you know what? I am depressed right now. And then you go seek out treatment, and now you're better. Even then, who are they to say, well, you can't have a firearm while you're going through treatment? Number one. Number two, what happens? So you've been hospitalized and now you've been clean, or you were on drugs and then you got help, and now all of a sudden you can't have a firearm because 10 years ago you popped positive for marijuana or whatever, or alcohol, you got a DWI. I mean, it's ridiculous when you read what they can do to restrict your license. And of course you have to turn in your license, turn in all your ammunition, turn in all your guns, because now you're in violation of your license that you had to have to exhibit your Second Amendment right that shouldn't be infringed on in the first place. None of it makes sense,
it's
man.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's really mind-boggling. And of course, like all good gun control bills, they go after the the boogeyman, the high-capacity magazines. And this is another one of those ones in here that shows to me that they have no real intention of actually passing this bill. And so what is the purpose? Why are they going through this exercise? Are they trying to set the groundwork for negotiation where they pull out some of the crazy shit, but they still get some of their still crazy shit, but not batshit crazy? They're not Joker crazy, but they're kind of like Riddler crazy kind of thing, if you want to get into the comic book section of it. But
throw as much as they can at it.
In California, even the high capacity mag in California has been defeated in the courts. Now it's been undefeated through. It's still complicated. They're still going through the court battle. You still can't have high capacity magazines in California. It's amazing. All the ones in boating accidents showed up the day after that decision. They just they all floated back ashore, and then magically 3 days later, everybody lost them in boating accidents again. I mean, you'd think they'd learn the first time. You don't take your mags out on a boat, but apparently people don't.
They're heavy. They fall overboard.
And so they
got 30 rounds in them.
The bill specifically calls out any kind of device that can hold 10 rounds or more. So basically your mag limit's at 10, which outlaws a good portion of the guns in the country to this. A majority. It's more than 50% of the firearms.
Every pistol
are able to accept a magazine of more than 10 rounds.
Yeah, most of them.
Even your nonchalant 9mm pistols. I think my where John brought it over here.
I put it back.
My concealed carry 9mm, which is a single stack, has the ability to carry 12 rounds.
Right.
And it's a single stack. Basically, if you have a 1911 or like a plug, I think PMag is even making plugs for magazines that allows them to, and I get it. It's one of those things I'm not happy with PMag for, because I get it. They want to be able to sell mags to people in states that have restrictions, but at the same time, you're enabling the government. Now you're making it okay for them to.
Right. Look how easy it is for us to comply.
You can have a mag, and now you can comply. We're going to make it. And
they did carve out. My little squirrel rifle, that little 22. So if it can hold, and it's a tubular
and it's a tubular
magazine, you can have way more than 10 rounds. That is a complete carve out. Thank God for the government to give us the ability to shoot
22
squirrels.
Can't kill people.
Yeah, no. It's non-lethal.
I think my dad has a saying. He does have a saying. I think my dad. I don't know how many times my dad has told me he's killed more deer with a 22 than any other rifle.
Yeah, I watched my dad shoot an alligator with one and kill it. So I mean, anybody who says that a 22, especially if being fired out of a rifle, is a joke, and they need to think again. It is a very powerful round.
And that's the thing is like the assault weapon. What they describe as a military style rifle. They get into this thing with bayonet studs and pistol grips that protrude conspicuously beneath the action of the weapon. A flash suppressor or a threaded barrel designed to accommodate a flash suppressor. Right. All of these things don't. I mean, they even list grenade launcher.
Grenade launcher, guys.
For fuck's sake! In order to be able to attach a grenade launcher, you have to go through it's already a fucking giant paperwork nightmare to get a grenade launcher
as a civilian. Right?
But the idea that a bayonet lug is something that isn't even determined into what makes a weapon more dangerous than another weapon is a tiny piece of metal that allows you to attach a fucking knife.
Right.
A knife.
What's the government afraid of?
bayonet charges, apparently.
I guess. Like,
but
fix bayonets.
The one that's crazy to me is the flash suppressor, or a threaded barrel designed to accommodate a flash suppressor. The problem with this is that basically makes suppressors illegal. Now you cannot have a firearm that you can attach a suppressor.
Right.
And they get more specific. With pistols, they basically say a pistol that has a barrel that can attach a suppressor is no longer legal.
Or barrel extenders.
Right.
Like, so, like, forever it was making your barrel too short was illegal. Now, if you want to put a barrel extender on there some way, somehow, you're being illegal. Like,
now here's the crazy thing, and a lot of people don't know this. So if you go to Europe, which has some crazy gun laws, and that's their right. I'm not trying to be critical of their gun laws. From our perspective, they have crazy gun laws. They're very restrictive. It's super hard to get guns. In some countries like France, you can still get the same guns as us. It just takes, a year of paperwork. And, it's even worse than trying to buy an automatic weapon here in the United States. But at the end of the day, when you get your firearm, you can buy a suppressor. It's unregulated. The suppressors, you can buy them like candy bars at the gun store. There's no paperwork. And in some countries, like Ireland, if you buy a firearm, it's mandatory. You have to have a suppressor.
Yep.
The United States is one of the only places that made this boogeyman rule with suppressors. And it has to do with ignorance. And if you look and maybe this is something we get into another day, is talk about how absolutely ridiculous the NFA Act was and how it was formed and the reasons behind it. It wasn't for gun safety.
No, it was money.
So the idea that you are going to...
Well, what was it underneath the... I don't care. I believe, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but we can verify it. I think it was it was the Great Depression, and folks were poaching, and they were using silencers to kill game off season.
That was one of the bullshit. That was one of the bullshit excuses they used to.
And that was the suppressor thing. Like,
basically, the NFA banned every gun, and they realized they couldn't get it passed, so they went from this extreme and they dialed it back a little bit.
Oh, that's right.
And the intent was always the same: was to take firearms away from people,
make money,
and they were using the fear around the mobsters and the Tommy guns and all that kind of stuff to dictate to people that it was not safe to have firearms. But nonetheless, so you're going to take something that was legal and a lot of people have and have spent a lot of money on. They paid the government an extra $300 tax stamp. Is it 300 or is it 200?
200 for me.
So it's 200, sorry.
It was 200 for me, and then it took me 9 months for the ATF to come back and say I was good to go. And then I had to get cleared by the sheriff, take my fingerprints and all the rest of it.
So something that a lot of people have already spent a lot of money on, they already own, is now going to be outlawed. And there's no grandfather clause. And there is no descriptive prescription for what you're supposed to do. So what that means is basically you're going to have to end up destroying or turning them in. So it's a complete loss. So now you have the government confiscating value, which again is a violation of the Constitution.
Right.
And their prescription for this, I can promise you, you're going to see it. This is going to come up in conversations. You're going to see it on all the shows, whether you watch Tucker Carlson or Anderson Cooper or whatever dipshits on MSNBC. What they're going to say is, okay, fine. You're right. We can't just take your property away. So we'll do buybacks, with the connotation that a buyback is optional. Like, oh, well, we'll buy it back if you want to. No.
You're going to.
This is a mandatory buyback, which is a confiscation.
Right.
We're just going to give you money for it. It's your property, but we just say you can't have it anymore because we don't think you should, even though there's no science that backs up what you have is dangerous or that is even harmful, and there's nothing to show that any of the thing that we're doing is going to make people safer anymore.
No, we're going
to take it away.
We're going to take it away. Yeah.
Because we think so. Never mind the fact that the people that guard me and protect me and watch my children's schools and guard my house, they're good. They're all cool. We're okay with them having guns. But you peasants, you're not allowed. We don't want you to be able to protect yourself.
It's the truth, man. Yep. And then they back it up with gigantic fines. Like, so the way this thing is written, and imprisonment, not just one or the other. It's both. Like, if you're in violation of one of these things, it says that you need to be. Let's see here. You can be fined no less than $50,000 and not more than $100,000 and not less than 10 years. Not less
than 10 years.
10 years.
We're not exaggerating. If you knowingly violate the insurance, the licensing,
or the fact
the registration, if you knowingly violate any three of those, you will go to jail for no less than 10 years.
But not more than 20. So, 2 decades and they're letting you go after you're broke and you can't afford
This is coming from the same party that wants to defund the police and get rid of prisons.
Have you seen that lately, though?
Yeah.
That's its own podcast. But yeah, now they're begging the cops to come back. Please come back.
Minneapolis.
Yeah, Minneapolis, specifically Minneapolis. But no, you know.
What was it? What was it? The one thing you just said we skimmed over.
If you loan
loaning.
yeah, if you say, hey, Ty, I own a good hunting firearm, but
no, you don't.
Yes, I do. A 30-30's killed more deer.
No, you don't.
Than anything else in the world. But anyway, if I want to borrow yours, which is better, we'll put it that way, and I'm in violation, I tell the AG, you tell the AG that you loaned it to me for a week, and then I get snowed in on top of the mountain, and I'm there for 8 days. You go to prison.
For not less than 10 years.
For not less than 10 years. And encounter the same
And on
fines.
top of this, it's not just the gun. If you loan ammo.
And ammo. Yeah, just ammo too. Yeah.
So if we go to the range and you grab the wrong ammo can and you grab your 9mm and forget 45 ammo and you want to shoot 45, I can't loan you 45 ammo.
Unless you tell the AG
because we have
in
to
Washington.
contact the AG. Somehow everybody's supposed to contact the AG. Not your state AG, not your city attorney. I don't even know, whatever the city equivalent of AG is. You have to call
Sheriff
Bill Barr himself,
police chief,
his office, and let him know, hey, I'm going to let John borrow 7 rounds. Now, we're going to go down range, and I'm going to collect those 7 rounds because he only borrowed them, and I'm going to get them back.
But if he shoots 8, now you're in violation. So, yeah, anyway, none of this shit makes sense, guys. That's the whole point. Like, if you loan it to your wife, if you're like, hey, you know what, I want you to take payroll to the bank, here's my pistol.
And that's the thing. A lot of these bills, a lot of times, they actually try to make exemptions for that for spouses or in households.
Not here.
There's nothing in here.
Yeah.
That's how dumb this bill is.
They spell out, including spouses.
This is how dumb this bill is. It's only fitting that
Sheila Jackson
cowboy
Lee.
hat wearing Sheila Jackson Lee, the dumb shit who wanted to see the fucking flag planted by Neil Armstrong on Mars, is the one who sponsored the bill. Now I don't think this woman
Committee on Science.
Yeah. I don't think this woman wrote the bill. I don't think she had anything to do with it. And most they don't. Somebody else wrote it. But at the end of the day, she's the person that was picked to sponsor the bill.
Yeah. I don't. How do you answer anyway? How do you answer any of this stuff, dude? So yeah, like this thing is a train wreck from the moment go. The more I read it, the more I got sick to my stomach.
Now where does this go, you ask? You know, when you look at what this has to do, it'll get through the House. I think it'll get through the House. I don't know the middle ground House seats as well as I do know the Senate. It might not even be able to get through the House, a bill like this. And it's still got to go through committees. It's gone through some. It's still got to go through more. This isn't the final version of the bill yet, and it could still change. Assuming it gets through the House, there is no way in hell this gets through the Senate.
No.
There's no way. Even if you have...
Some of the bluest of blue states, dude, are...
All I can say is if John Tester of Montana signed onto this bill, and I'm not threatening the guy. I wouldn't do anything. I've met the man, and I actually personally despise the man because he lied to me to my fucking face when he said he was going to get the VA system taken care of. And I sat. Many people might not know this, but I sat down on a committee with Tester when he came to MSU back when the VA was having a lot of problems. And Shinseki, well, God, I can't say his name. Shinseki, I've got a challenge going from him. He took over. Honorable vet, guy served. Wounded combat veteran, awesome dude. I just don't think he knew what bureaucracy he was getting into. This was the preemptive mess to where you had vets dying on hold lists because they were quotas and all the other bullshit that happened with the VA. Prior to that, I sat down with Tester to speak specifically about Montana VA issues, and I had gotten together with a bunch of buddies that I was in college with, and the issues they were facing trying to be seen by the VA. You know, guys having to drive 6 hours in Montana to get to the nearest VA hospital because they can't go see their local doctor, all those kind of issues. And the guy promised me he was going to take care of stuff and address issues, and all he ended up doing was kissing Obama's boot heels and playing the political nicey-nice. So basically, John Tester can go fuck himself, and I don't care. I think he's a worthless sack of shit who lies to vets and just plays politics to make himself look better. But now that we got that out of the way, I don't
How
think
do you really feel?
I don't think John Tester will vote against this because I don't think he'll be able to step foot back in Montana. He won't be able to vote for this because if he did, he wouldn't be able to step foot back in Montana.
But that goes for a lot of. In Montana's a red state. There's a lot of blue states out here that. I mean, think about how many firearms are manufactured in, say, Massachusetts. Connecticut, specifically Connecticut.
New York.
What's the other one? Vermont. New Hampshire,
and they're starting to move out. They're starting to move out of those states, but nonetheless,
but yeah, live free or die.
There's a lot of Democratic senators that live in very pro-gun states
and
they won't be able to. No, they won't be able to face their constituents like this.
No, hell no. You're telling me the guys in West Virginia, who mine coal for a living, want to turn in their firearms, don't want to be able to protect, living in rural wherever the fuck they are, with wolves and bears and shit. Mm-hmm. Like they're not going to want to turn in their firearms. Like. Yeah, there would be political suicide for these guys to vote for this.
Yep.
I do not see any rendition of this being. I mean, half the stuff that's in here we already have. A background check, yeah, we already have that. No automatic firearms, we already have that. An NFA for destructive devices, we already have that. I mean, so some of this shit's already covered, but overwhelmingly, this is communism. I don't know how to put it any other way.
It's the road to it. It's the road to more control. At the end of the day. It might not necessarily be an avenue to try to, full fascism or communism, whatever you want to call it, to take over the country and tell you what to do. But what it does do is make you more dependent. Look at places in this country right now where you can't defend yourself and you're completely dependent upon the government to provide for your defense.
Like Chicago.
You can't speak out against them, because if you do, you will lose that protection.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
I mean, you look at, New York, Long Island, that bartender that just wanted to open. He was just trying to make a living.
They swarmed him and took him away like he was a terrorist, like he was Osama bin Laden. They swarmed him with like 10 cops, took him away and unmarked, drug him out of there. Like, why? Because he wanted to open up his business.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I guess we could probably close on something like this.
Yeah, we beat this one into the ground. Yeah. I hope we provided some information for you guys, added a little bit of value to your day. Did a little bit digging so you didn't have to. By all means, if you have questions, hit us up in the comments down below.
Like and subscribe.
Make sure you like and subscribe. As always, helps out a bunch with the channel.
Oh,
yeah. Maybe we'll do a couple of shorts on this. We'll dive in a little bit more in depth to individual specifics. But when time comes for this, make sure you're talking to your representatives. Montana's not a big deal. I don't think we have to worry about Danes. But make sure you blow Tester's phone up because he's going to be one of the few that's going to stand a firewall between here and them basically making, I don't know, what do you think, 30-40% of the United States felons overnight?
Probably more than that. I mean, when you think about how many people have a 9mm at home.
Yeah, with more than 10 rounds.
With more than 10 rounds, right? I mean, this is ridiculous.
We thank everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yep. Thank you. As always, Semper Fi.